So my name is Tasha Marks. I'm a food historian and artist. I'm 30 years old and I'm born and raised in London, and I live in London now. I started a creative practice called AVM Curiosities in 2011, which basically looks at how you bring the senses into the gallery space, so using taste and smell and sound as a sort of storyteller. My background is in art history. Like a lot of art historians, I sort of wanted to be a curator to work with museums, and it was the early museums, the cabinets of curiosity, that really inspired me. And these were collections that were a sort of universe in a box, and they were very sensory and immersive, and I was fascinated by these early spaces. And then when I learned about food history in my final year at university, suddenly these sort of banquets and amazing feasts and displays of just wealth and creativity and power from the past, I felt like these two things really worked well together. And in the gallery space, what we sort of gained in knowledge, we maybe lost in that sort of sensory experience. So through projects that I do, I tend to bring back some of that sort of experiential quality. I've done things like scent chambers for the National Gallery, large sugar sculptures for the V&A. I've worked with sound in all sorts of places. Just a way to sort of tell different stories of collections and make things come to life a little bit. And it's not just about the collections coming to life. For me, it's about making the visitors change how they're behaving in the gallery space. I think when we think about galleries, we're told, we speak quietly, we're told don't touch anything, definitely don't lick anything. So I'm trying to change people's behaviour as much as their experience of the space itself. So the sort of butternut squash tagine that I made is one of my sort of go-to dinner party recipes. It's the thing I often make for friends when they come round. It's partly because it's really tasty, but also it's something that you can make in advance. And the longer you leave it, the more the flavours infuse. And I think that when you invite people around for dinner, they're there to see you, and you don't want to spend all the time in the kitchen. So having something that is big sharing plates, you can dish it out on the table, people can take as much as they want. I think it's always, for me, a great compliment if people want seconds. I'm not a house that has a lot of leftovers. Things tend to get eaten quite a lot, and that makes me very happy. Being vegetarian for a couple of years now, it's something that I really enjoy, and I think even when friends come around who are meat eaters, this dish is so full of those like umami, savoury flavours that everyone seems to really like it. So for me, food is one of the richest subjects to really engage with. The history of food is very much a sort of history of mankind. Food is political in its very nature. Food can divide us as much as it brings us together. If we think about food in a historical sense, things that we take for granted now were hugely influential in history. It was sugar that was my first experience really of the crossover between food and art. The sort of Renaissance sugar sculptures, these were, a single sugar sculpture would cost the same amount as a portrait. We just don't have these examples of history left anymore. It's a sort of hidden history. But people would assert their power, their dominance, their political allegiances, all through what they served on the dessert table. And those confectioners, they were treated like artists, and they would travel around the courts of Europe like any painter or sculptor would. So for me, having a chef or having an artist, they're very much intertwined with each other. Politics of food is such an interesting one, particularly sugar. It's got such a tumultuous past. And I think the darker aspects of different foodstuffs, things like the slave trade or how power and commodities are very much linked with all sorts of things that were going on in history, with war, with all sorts of things that happened. I think they're very much linked together, and for me, sweets in particular, they're a little micro way of talking about a macro world. So I've made a colour-changing gin and tonic. So this is a gin that's been infused with butterfly pea flower. This is a natural flower that was dried, and then I added it to the gin to infuse, and it turns the gin this sort of vibrant blue colour. It was actually the first time I ever done it for this video, but I thought it would be quite a fun thing to try. So the flowers sort of get affected by the pH of the drink, so as soon as you add the tonic, the blue turns to this sort of vibrant pink colour, and I think that sort of element of wow is always a bit fun. So the chocolate ice cream with chocolate marble. The chocolate marble was something that I invented sort of by accident once. I started working with chocolate about 6 years ago or something, and I started just by teaching myself and experimenting with tempering and techniques and things like that. And the marbling effect was when I'd let the chocolate sit on the table for too long before colouring it or spraying it with silver, and it had started to harden. So I sprayed on this silver spray, and then, I don't know, it sort of didn't go right, it sort of started to crack, and so I mixed it together with a toothpick, and I was like, oh, it makes this amazing marbling effect. And I think sometimes teaching yourself these techniques, you make these sort of happy accidents, whereas if you just knew how to do it, that would always be how it was done. And I think making mistakes is always a fun thing to do in the kitchen. In fact, one of my favourite quotes is Picasso, who said, "Creativity is allowing yourself to make mistakes, and art is knowing which ones to keep," which sounds very pretentious, but I think it applies in the kitchen as much as in the art studio. People often ask me about how I got into what I do, because it is a slightly unusual job. But I think the real reason is that no one ever told me I couldn't. I think that belief in really following what your passions are and finding that niche for yourself, and working hard and making it work for you. My dad actually gave me a piece of advice when I was at primary school. He said, "The job you'll do, you don't even know exists yet." I think that was very true. I couldn't ever guess, the idea of having like a 5-year plan or anything like that is something I've never had. But just to live in the moment and make the most of opportunities, and that business and creative practices, whatever you choose to do in your life, is personal, because life is personal. And I think that if you give it everything you've got, then you're bound to be a success.